Solomon's life reveals a deep truth that runs through Scripture from beginning to end. God's blessings follow wisdom, honor, stewardship, purpose, and obedience. When we look closely at Solomon's journey, from a young, inexperienced king to the wealthiest and wisest ruler of his time, we see patterns that still speak to believers today. These patterns are not abstract ideas or poetic phrases, but living principles woven into the design of God's kingdom. When they are practiced with sincerity and faith, they create real transformation in a person's life. Solomon never viewed wisdom as information. He viewed it as the breath of God flowing into human decision-making. This is why his first act as king wasn't to request armies, riches, land, or political alliances. Instead, he went before the Lord and asked for an understanding heart. Solomon understood something profound. Money can be lost, buildings can crumble, empires can weaken, and human praise can fade. But wisdom, true God-given wisdom, creates the foundation for every good thing. Wisdom guides choices, transforms character, shapes relationships, and influences outcomes. When Solomon asked God for wisdom, he wasn't simply seeking intelligence. He was asking God to dwell within his choices and lead him in every decision. Because Solomon placed wisdom above wealth, God entrusted wealth to him. This shows that when wisdom sits on the throne of a person's heart, wealth becomes a servant rather than a master. Wealth flows toward wisdom because wisdom knows how to nurture, protect, multiply, and distribute resources according to God's will. As Solomon grew in wisdom, honor naturally became part of his life. Honor is a theme that appears again and again in Solomon's writings. He understood honor not as flattery or performance, but as a reflection of the heart. Honor begins with God and flows into every area of life. How we handle money, how we treat people, how we speak, how we work, and how we worship. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings at Gibeon, not because God needed them, but because Solomon needed to express honor. That act of devotion wasn't ordinary or casual, it was extravagant, and the moment Solomon placed honor before God, God responded with blessing. The Bible teaches that those who honor God with their first and best will see the windows of heaven open. Honor isn't merely giving, it's acknowledging God as the ultimate source of every resource. When a believer honors God, it positions their heart in a posture where God can trust them with more. Honor is not about wealth leaving your life. It's about divine favor entering your life. Solomon wrote that when you honor the Lord with your wealth and the first of all your increase, your barns will be filled with plenty. This is a divine pattern. Honor produces abundance because honor invites God to guide your steps, oversee your decisions, and bless the work of your hands. As Solomon grew in wisdom and honor, he developed an excellent spirit. Excellence isn't perfection but intentionality. Solomon observed nature, studied human behavior, examined leadership, and refined his skills as a ruler. His Proverbs reveal a man deeply invested in understanding the world God created. Solomon knew that a person who is diligent, the kind of person who pays attention to details, follows through on commitments, and strives for improvement, will stand before kings. This wasn't a metaphor for him. It became his reality. Kings and queens traveled from far regions to hear his wisdom. The Queen of Sheba journeyed across deserts just to ask him questions, and she left astonished by his excellence in governance, architecture, management, organization, and hospitality. Excellence attracted wealth because excellence reflects God's nature. Scripture says that whatever we do, we should do it as unto the Lord. Solomon embraced this long before Paul wrote it. His workmanship, administration, writing, and leadership were acts of worship. Because he served with excellence, God trusted him with greater influence. Excellence is magnetic. People are drawn to those who take responsibility, care deeply, and work from the heart. Solomon understood that excellence multiplies opportunities, elevates influence, and increases prosperity. Solomon also recognized the importance of relationships. He wrote extensively about wisdom gained through companionship and wisdom lost through foolish company. He understood that the people around you shape your thinking, influence your decisions, and affect your destiny. Solomon surrounded himself with skilled workers, counselors, builders, scribes, and advisors. He formed alliances that strengthened his kingdom and relationships that expanded Israel's influence. He knew that isolation weakens but connection strengthens. In Proverbs, Solomon teaches that those who walk with the wise become wise, but those who associate with the foolish suffer harm. Relationships can lift you or drain you. They can unlock doors or close them. They can sharpen you or dull you. Solomon's own rise was supported by Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the warrior, Zadok the priest, and other faithful allies. His kingdom was built not by one man, but through wise partnerships. In the same way, believers today must examine the company they keep. If the goal is prosperity, purpose, and wisdom, then relationships must align with that direction. Being around people of vision, discipline, faith, and integrity elevates your life. Solomon teaches that relational wisdom is financial wisdom because relationships often determine access, opportunities, and outcomes. While Solomon possessed wealth, he also managed it with precision and stewardship. Stewardship was not optional in Solomon's kingdom. It was necessary for the growth and sustainability of Israel's prosperity. Solomon understood the condition of his flocks, the productivity of his vineyards, the capacities of his workers, and the flow of his resources. He organized officials, appointed leaders, delegated responsibilities, and ensured that every part of the economy functioned efficiently. His wealth was not the result of randomness or impulsive spending. It was the fruit of structure, discipline, planning, and wise investment. Solomon invested in trade routes, maritime ventures, agriculture, and international commerce. He recorded, tracked, and assessed the resources under his authority. He wrote that a wise person knows the state of their flocks, meaning that financial awareness is spiritual. God blesses what we steward, not what we neglect. Many Christians pray for financial breakthrough, but overlook the biblical requirement of stewardship. Solomon teaches that without structure, wealth slips away. Without discipline, prosperity drains. Without planning, blessings are mismanaged. Stewardship is not about restriction, it is about preparation. When a believer organizes their finances, controls spending, avoids unnecessary debt, and plans for the future, they align themselves with the rhythm of God's wisdom. Solomon's kingdom prospered because it was built on steady, intentional stewardship. Solomon also taught the power of words. He knew that the mouth directs the mind, and the mind directs the life. Proverbs is filled with verses about the impact of speech, because Solomon understood that prosperity is not only financial, but emotional, spiritual, and verbal. He wrote that death and life are in the power of the tongue. This wasn't poetic language, it was a spiritual law. The words a person speaks reflect the state of their heart and set the direction of their future. Solomon's own wisdom was shared through thousands of proverbs, demonstrating that he valued communication as a divine instrument. He taught that gentle words bring peace, harsh words cause strife, wise words bring healing, and foolish words lead to ruin. Solomon recognized that people either build their lives with their words or tear them down with their words. A believer who constantly speaks defeat, lack, fear, and frustration eventually shapes a life that reflects those declarations. But a believer who speaks faith, blessings, wisdom, hope, and purpose aligns themselves with the promises of God. Solomon encourages people to speak with intention, using words to strengthen their spirit, renew their mind, and affirm God's truth. Speaking scripture, especially the wisdom found in Proverbs, creates mental clarity and spiritual resilience. When a believer declares that God is their provider, that they walk in wisdom, that favor surrounds them, and that their steps are ordered by the Lord, they train their mind to expect God's goodness. Solomon teaches that words are seeds, what you speak grows. Throughout Solomon's journey, purpose was the anchor that kept him aligned with God's plan. Solomon did not pursue wealth for vanity. One of his greatest purposes was building the temple, a project his father David dreamed of but could not complete. God entrusted Solomon with something sacred, and Solomon used his wisdom, wealth, and resources to fulfill that divine assignment. Solomon understood that provision follows purpose. When a believer seeks God's kingdom first, everything else is added. God provides where God leads. Solomon's prosperity was connected to his obedience to the purpose God placed upon his life. Purpose gives direction, discipline, motivation, and meaning. Without purpose, wealth becomes empty and directionless. With purpose, wealth becomes a tool for impact, generosity, and legacy. Solomon teaches that when a believer aligns their gifts, talents, and resources with God's plan, abundance flows naturally. Purpose attracts provision because God always funds his assignments. Solomon's life reveals a divine pattern. Wisdom attracts wealth, honor unlocks increase, excellence elevates, relationships influence destiny, stewardship sustains prosperity, words shape outcomes, and purpose draws provision. These principles are not outdated or limited to ancient kings. They remain eternal truths for anyone who desires to walk in God's blessings. When these principles are practiced with sincerity, humility, and consistency, they transform finances, relationships, mindset, and spiritual life. A believer who embraces these lessons steps into a life shaped not by chance, but by divine wisdom. Solomon shows that prosperity is not accidental, but intentional, built through faith, guided by Scripture, empowered by God, and sustained through discipline. His life stands as a testament that when you walk in God's wisdom, blessings, favor, and abundance follow.